Hello, we are
Hello.
live. I can't say I'm ready for this. We have a crazy day ahead, but let's do this. We're gonna do our best. We are basically today we're talking about the benefits of meditation, both the subtle and the kind of more profound. And we also have a couple of couple of questions that we're going to answer as well that we're going to tie into our talk.
Mm-hmm.
So also one of the questions that we had was kind of a very deep sort of question that we're going to explore in another live that's also going to tie into our like Halloween special, because we're going to be talking about inner demons. And how is it that like outer demons and inner demons kind of correspond? um, we all know the axiom as within, so without. So that's something that's coming up. I'm just kind of like putting it out there for you guys to tune in for that. That's going to be really interesting. But without further ado, let's just jump in right away. I'm going to get a sip of water here. Okay. So on the most basic level, so actually, should we start with the question and then
Maybe
kind
we
of
do that.
integrate it?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the questions was, can you look in your...
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One of the questions was, how do you know that you're meditating successfully?
And not just
Closing your eyes. Okay. There are a few ways to answer this, but I want to ask one question first. If you want to get a degree in engineering, let's say, and you go to school, right? How do you know you're not going to fail? How do you know you're going to really become an engineer, right? So there are like certain things, that you're studying, you're going to classes, you're not missing classes, you're learning, you're learning different things that tie into this whole sort of conglomerate. Is that the word? Can I say that? That's engineering. So it's no different with meditation. When it comes to spiritual subjects, we get very mystified about things, but actually the way things work in meditation and spirituality is exactly the way they work in anything else that we're trying to grow at or learn, right? So and this is also a good question, right? Because it's important, it's possible to engage in the practice of meditation in a way that's like incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, I mean, that's actually, it depends also on the level at which you approach practice. So there are a couple of perspectives. So there is like the perspective of just practicing meditation so that you can kind of be relaxed, have a little more inner peace, have your creativity flow better. Like that's kind of a more secular, practical approach to meditation. And that's perfectly, valid, right? But then there is like the actual potential of meditation practices to take you way beyond that. Meditation can lead to total transcendence. So the question is, first of all, what is your goal? Why are you meditating in the first place? By the way, you jump in whenever I'm just...
Keep going.
um so so first of all, what is your goal? If you know your goal, if you know why you're doing something, then you're going to know, then you have something to gauge, like, oh, am I doing well with this? Am I doing it right? First of all, let's look at some misconceptions about meditation. Meditation is not just sitting there and spacing out and just kind of like it's very the meditation path is very specific. uh, when it comes to spiritual traditions, which both Tom and I are part of a spiritual tradition that has like an entire legacy and teachings, and there are very specific things we're trying to accomplish through meditation. You have, when you're part of a spiritual path, you have context. Everything is laid out. You do things in a certain way for very specific reasons. And this is why we prefer being part of a tradition, because you're getting full guidance and you know where you're going, right? So
we're doing this Patreon 30-day meditation challenge, and this week we introduced setting an intention before you meditate and then dedicating at the end of meditation. So I think what Lana's saying, and this is a really great example, is that when you're setting an intention, why you're meditating, you can ask yourself, am I accomplishing what I wanted? Now, maybe your intention is to calm the mind and be a little more focused, more balanced. Ask yourself, is that happening? Are you getting the results that you intended? But another, I think, a bigger thing that I find is when I'm setting my mind to focus on a specific object, how often am I straying from it? Do I find I'm losing the thread? Do I find I'm holding on to it more? That's a real, that's a real quantifiable proof of how much success you're having in meditation. So if you're sitting and just closing your eyes and your mind wanders, you're fantasizing, you're making lists of what you need to shop for, you're thinking about who's wronged you, and if those are the things that are arising and you didn't set the intention to do that, then you're not really meditating. And to be quite honest, meditation is something that we're practicing to achieve. Meditation, the real point of meditation is to gain a one-pointed focus on a subject that doesn't waver.
You want to tell them about the two?
So there's two main techniques that are employed in Buddhist meditation, at least, and I think it's actually a universal classification, but I digress. The two main techniques are shamatha and vipassana. Shamatha is calm abiding. It's to hold an object without wavering from it.
So it's like concentrate. You're learning to concentrate your mind and to keep it on an object without wavering.
Right.
And if anybody who ever sat down to meditate, with holding the breath as an object or whatever, realize that like within seconds your mind is like it's just somewhere else. And sometimes at the beginning, for beginning meditators, it's like it could be like 5-10 minutes before you even realize that you wandered. So like that's how messed up our minds are. I don't want to say messed up, but like wild horse. Yeah, just like
wild horse is great.
So the first level is to bring it where you want it to go. Yeah.
The second technique is vipassana, and this is analytical meditation or special insight. It's usually translated. This is an analytical meditation where you're taking a topic, thinking it through, unraveling it, but not wavering from it. And like we said in a previous recording, we're already masters of vipassana meditation, but it's usually our problems that we're focusing on.
Shamatha too, because it's so easy to concentrate on somebody who like aggravates you, right?
And you do it without getting scattered thinking about lists of shopping and things like that. You're able to say, this person is this kind of blah, blah, blah. And you can hold, it's like a dialogue. If you saw it typed out, what you were saying in your head, it would be like a script, with one topic, a lecture even. So, but the idea is that you're able to become the master of your mind, not your mind be the master. Lama Tsongkhapa said that, and he was an amazing guy. But what we're aiming for is the ability to choose where your mind goes and keep it there as long as you want. This is one of the most quantifiable results of meditation. So that's where I think you can make the digression between sitting there spacing out with your eyes closed and actually meditating. It's holding your object.
And I also want to mention, like, the part that the analytical aspect of meditation, well, it's described in Lamrim, which is translates as the graduated path to enlightenment. It's Buddhist text. But in a nutshell, the most important thing that you analyze is how you see yourself and your reality. Because right now we live like in La La Land. We live in the world of projections and appearances, whatever. It's kind of like, you see a person, and the way that person appears to you, which is based on how you relate to them, based on your programming, based on like the society, the times we live in.
Yeah.
So all of these filters come up. And then when you look at the person, you see them through a filter, and you think that what you see is what's actually there, and it's not. So meditation is about like removing filters and seeing things as they actually are, outside of your kind of self-referential point of view. You kind of float out of your ego and you see things clearly, versus like through this lens of like preferences, like I like this, I don't like this, I approve it. And this brings me to this thing where, like, point of view and perspective from which we practice will determine how what your goal is, and it will determine what your outcome is. So like I said, on a secular level, and actually somebody asked a question, which I'm just gonna like, I don't know if this is the right time to put it in, but somebody asked about like thoughts about David Lynch and transcendental meditation. I don't know much about it. I love David Lynch. He's amazing. He's fantastic. I love that guy, and his work. I always thought of transcendental people to be more like secular community. And Tom and I looked it up a little bit online before we came on, and saw that actually the technique they follow springs from the yoga tradition, from the Indian tradition, Vedic yogis, Hindu. Okay. So, but I do happen to know some of the people who practice, and they're more secular. And, there's nothing wrong with that. I can tell you my opinion on something, but again, that's not reality of that thing.
Right.
My opinion can be valid, and it can be even like very accurate in certain sense, like maybe educated. But the thing is that everything is relative, and something that would never work for me and for Tom and for somebody else may actually work wonders for you. So my answer to that would be to go and check it out yourself and meet the community and try it out, and then, feel it out.
I was always drawn to the long lineage kind of practice. Tibetan Buddhism is my main focus, and Zen is another one I spend a good amount of time with. And, you can kind of, one way to judge a tradition or a path is to say, what do the masters and the practitioners of that path look like? How is it working for them? How do you want to behave the way they do, or reflect the qualities they reflect? David Lynch, I would love to be a genius like him. So I certainly have no issue with it. But I also really admire His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so, I can speak more fluently about those traditions, but I think they're great. If it works for you, wonderful. I rejoice.
So the reason I brought that question up now is because I'm mentioning secular. So the benefits of meditation, if you approach it from a secular perspective, meaning you don't have any kind of more spiritual, you're like non-religious, meditation in itself is not dependent on religion. It's just very technical. You're working with your mind. But how far you want to take that does depend on your worldview. So like if you're a very materialistic kind of worldview, then, you're going to practice meditation so that you can become calm, patient, have some kind of a balanced life, maybe help, expand your creativity. Meditation will definitely expand you and make you a better version of yourself. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about like honing in meditation, if practiced regularly, and like practicing like sometimes, like practicing like, twice a week and then taking a week break and then another time, and then, or like practicing whenever you feel like it, that's nice, but it's not going to bring you any real results. Just like same thing, like think like going to the gym, or doing anything for that matter, like practicing piano. You want to learn a piano. If you just practice whenever like it occurs to you, you're not really going to learn. It's same thing with meditation. Like the more time you put in, the more you're going to see the results. So I lost my train of thought. So on the most basic level, what I witnessed, and like if you really kind of like you really want to practice, in our meditation challenge, we start with 10 minutes and we're building it slowly. But that's like really, that's just when you're trying to build the practice. As a meditator, daily meditator, you want to hit at least 30 minutes a day. If you can do that a couple of times a day, even better. But also, and that may sound like, oh my God, I can't, that's too much, but as a matter of fact, the more you get into it and the more you get into kind of mindfulness, and the more you start to kind of get closer to yourself, and the more your lifestyle will start to change accordingly. And what happens is, like, when you practice meditation, you start to develop a deeper self-awareness. What does that mean? That means that, like, if we get angry, if somebody pops up and says something and we're angry, if you sit down to meditate and you've had a little bit of practice and you can at least like start to kind of go inside, you might notice certain things. Like you might become more familiar with, what is the sensation in my body when I'm angry? What is the sensation when I'm sad, when I'm anxious, when I'm fearful, right? There are very specific flavors that occur in the body mind when these things happen. So like for me, in the past, like if I would get angry and I would sit to meditate, I would pretty quickly establish that, like, oh, wait a second, I'm not angry. I'm actually feeling hurt, and my response to this, the self-defensive mechanism of the ego, is to protect itself and to protect ourselves from pain, really, most of all. So then we get angry because it's easier to be angry and throw things around and, than to like get in touch with like the discomfort of pain. So what's happening, with the self-awareness is like things that were previously unconscious are becoming conscious. And what happens is also like you start to understand yourself on a much deeper level, and you start to realize, you start to become more cognizant of your humanity. So like, and this is where I'm like trying to see how, when we talk about spirituality and self-improvement, you can't just talk about meditation, for example. You can't just talk about like going to church or, doing a prayer or doing a ritual. It's not enough. These are just like little elements. Just like when you want to become an engineer, you can't just like study engineering. You have to learn numbers and letters first as a kid. You it's a gradual path. You have to learn physics and whatnot. You have to know about different materials. In the same way, self-improvement and growth requires a lot of different facets. And that's not to say like we're not trying to overwhelm anyone, but it's like you have to know a little bit about your psychology. You have to know a little bit about how ego works. It's beneficial to learn about ego and the shadow, these sorts of things. Then you learn techniques. You learn how to meditate, how to still your mind. You learn how to do pranayama. Like it's like endless, right? So there's a lot of different moving parts. So what meditation does is it starts to make you aware that the person that you thought you were, you really are not, because there are a lot of motivations and things springing from the unconscious. And ego has a lot of hidden motivations that it puts out there that we sort of project out, that we're not even aware of. So like oftentimes we'll think I'm doing something for one reason, like, oh, I'm it's like I want to give something. I want to give to charity, for example, or I want to like, but then when we give, we do it in such a way, we want to show other people that we're giving. And like, the motivation is always a mixed bag. So on one hand, we're giving because we're generous and we want to help, but there is always like some kind of selfish thing in there. It's like, I want others to see me, what a wonderful person I am. It's like there is like all this mixed stuff. And when we meditate, these things start to become apparent. And this causes us a lot of time to become very kind of put off by ourselves. And, we start to feel kind of disgusted, because what you're doing is like you're going in and you're going knee deep into your own garbage mind, and you're like digging through the dirt, and you're going to discover like some old bones, skeletons, all kinds of stuff. And a lot of times people, when they enter meditation, they start to feel like, oh my God, I'm getting worse as a result of meditating. I'm like becoming this, I'm seeing things that are terrible. It's actually, no, what you're doing is you're becoming more aware. And what you're seeing is actually, it looks very problematic, but guess what? It's actually very normal. Everybody has that. It's just that like nobody will tell you about their secret motivations because they're not even aware of them. So like in order to become enlightened or to reach your potential, whatever word you want to use, whether it's secular or spiritual, you have to go and uncover your demons. You have to confront them. You have to accept them. And again, like one of the moving parts we have to develop is compassion, because without self-compassion, our ego is not going to allow us to keep going. The ego, it will sabotage our meditation practice, and it will try to get us to go back to our automatic mode of being, like totally unaware of ourselves. Okay, but I want to also kind of cut through and quickly go back. So that's one of the benefits, is like you are waking up. You're no longer a zombie that's like on automatic. We're total robots. I like to, when I take Mercury out, I see, you can really like observe animals, how they behave, and you can kind of see that we're the same way. Like Mercury, when he goes out, he'll smell for another dog's pee, and then he'll pee over it, and then he'll do that like 100 million times, right? And then when he exhausted his little faucet, he'll still keep doing it. He'll raise leg, nothing will come out, and he's just like, he's programmed to do this. This is his like assertion of like alpha whatever personality.
Territory, yeah.
We're the same way. That looks like ridiculous, like when we see animals do things, but we're the same. We're just totally on automatic most of the time. And what's the end result if you persist through seeing all the garbage, and you're kind of like allowing yourself, you're kind of saying like, it's okay, I see this, but I can fix it, and that's why, that's the importance of having a community or a sangha, having spiritual teachers who can guide you, which is a little bit difficult when you're in meditation for secular reasons. Like you want to have a master who can guide you. But when, as a result of doing this and persisting and moving through it, you do start to get better. You start to get more patient. And the most important part is like you start to develop a deep trust. You start to trust yourself. You start to feel like I can rely on myself. That comes after a while. It takes time to get there. But what happens is also, as we uncover the ugly things in meditation, and I actually read this, I shared this on social media the other day. It was a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was saying something like, when you do your practice, and when you start to see yourself in like in a starving child, in a, what do you say, like when you start to see yourself in other people, and not only in people that you like, but people you dislike, then you can awaken compassion. Because when you see that it's not easy being a human being, it's not easy doing the right thing, we make mistakes all the time, then you can have some compassion for people, who make mistakes. And this is, I'm kind of getting tired, to be honest. I'm like,
Well,
it's been a day. I'm gonna like, you want to say something?
Yeah. So, the overall, the high level aim that I have for meditation, and what is, I think, my understanding of the Buddhist reason for meditating, is to become in control of our mind so we can then analyze reality and become more aware of what reality actually is. So, the idea is that we come closer and closer to behaving the way things actually are. But there's a lot of byproducts that come from meditation. Being calmer, having less stress, these kind of things are the byproducts. And those are wonderful too. They're not the aim as far as I'm concerned, but I'm thrilled to have those.
There's side effects.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if whatever you do, there's always going to be side effects. But again, like Tom said, that's not the goal.
So, one of the main side effects that I find is that through meditation, I create a space in my mind, and kind of the meta awareness, the higher self, you could say, the piece of me that is the more evolved part of myself, has the space to see how I'm reacting to things. And from that place, I have the ability to make a choice. Now, somebody, if I'm driving and somebody cuts me off, the impulse might be to curse them out and flick them the bird, or, be upset about it. Now, but with the space that meditation creates in my mind, that deeper meta awareness kind of sees this reflex. It sees this part of myself arising, and the impulse to get angry, the impulse to, move my body in a disrespectful way. And I have the space to say, hold on, this is a really stupid reason to let myself get angry. Being cut off on the road has very little effect in the overall plan of my day. So it gives me the ability to say, you know what? I'm not going to identify with this part of myself right now. And I can actually say, thank you to that piece for trying to protect me, but I don't need your help right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even personify some of these instincts or reflexes, especially the ones that you see in yourself that come up frequently. When you're walking down the street and you pass a donut shop and a piece of you says, oh, I'm going in there right now, you can suddenly say, wait a minute, do I want a donut? Do I want the sugar high and the inevitable crash that's going to come from it? Do I need to spend money right now on sugar? Maybe you do. Maybe
right.
It's going to be helpful, and maybe you deserve a little treat today. But meditation gives you the space to say, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Whoa,
whoa, whoa, whoa. Do I really want to follow this thread right now? And it's not to judge it and say, oh, you're not supposed to do anything that arises, but it gives you the chance to choose. And it gives you the power in your own mind. I think this is a really wonderful side effect of meditation. And it allows me to behave better. I'm certainly not a master of this, and I certainly still go with reflexes that I regret later.
But less so.
Less so.
And that's a big deal. Oh, shoot, our computer is about to crash. We have a YouTube going. I also want to say that
here, let me.
When we are meditating, this is a really big point. You're sitting there in your practice and you kind of see, you have your object of meditation, which is breath or whatever, and then you're in it, and then you see different things passing in the background, right? Like different thoughts, different narratives. And what happens as we meditate is we start to realize that those are just things that are passing through, and they're just voices. And before meditation, we tend to identify with a voice, and we tend to think that The anger that's passing through is like, oh, I am angry. It's like, no, you're just having an angry thought. What happens is like you attach to it, and then all of the narratives comes out, all the narratives come out, such as like, oh, she did this, how dare she, I'm this like very kind of like, we become so embodied in this like anger and a sense of self that's offended and like, but that's in reality, if you don't have, you can see the anger, you can even see if somebody does something wrong, right? You don't have to grab onto that and kind of accept it. It's, I forgot to say, was it Thich Nhat Hanh or somebody who said it, or Lama Zopa, I can't remember, that like when somebody says an unkind word, you can think of it as like they're giving you a gift. You don't have to accept it.
Yeah.
And if you like, and the thing with meditation, if you get to a place of really deep knowing of yourself, you know that like when you're angry, you say stuff that you don't always mean, and you become hijacked by negative emotions. And then there is no more, you're no longer here. It's just the anger, the voices of anger, the archetype of anger takes over. You say all kinds of stuff, and then after the fact you feel like ashamed or bad, or and that's the proof, like we get hijacked. So what meditation does is, first of all, it helps us see that these things that are passing through are just kind of clouds in the sky, and you can kind of sit back as they pass, and you don't have to jump on that train at all. So yeah.
Okay.
Well, there was, I forgot what I was going to say. There was something else I was going to say. You go.
I just saw somebody asked about what if anger is justified and when boundaries are being crossed. Now, I would say this is an important thing where you can use analytical meditation to start unraveling what anger does for you. And understanding from my side, anger never helps me. It never works for my benefit in the long run. Now, when we think a boundary is being crossed, it's important to understand what are those boundaries for? Why do I hold those boundaries? Maybe they are justified. Maybe they are important. But the fact that somebody has crossed a boundary and impinged on your self values, whatever it is, anger is not going to be, from my perspective, the most useful way to respond.
That's a valid perspective. It's not just your perspective. It's a valid perspective. First of all, anger, you're basically marinating in stress and you're punishing yourself. Anger is a response. First of all, it's a response of the ego, because we take things so personally. That's ego, and if you understand that, like, when people, even if people treat you badly, of course you have to have boundaries. If somebody is a jerk and a douchebag, you remove them from your life, but you don't have to engage in negativity and like then hurt them back and like say the unkind things back. It's a waste of time.
And I think that leads to a self-respect, that your identity is not so fragile that the crossing of a boundary causes you to lose control of yourself. And I think it gives you the ability to use the most functional response to a situation and inform somebody or show them what you're doing is not beneficial to me, it's not beneficial to you. There's a lot of things like that, but anger itself is not a fruitful path to go down.
Somebody says something which just brings me to a thought. He says, anger helps us make a change when needed. With more and more meditation, it can also not hijack us as much as we can sit in authentic anger, but not be controlled by it and rather use it as a tool. Here's another point. Anger is just, if you think, let's analyze anger, let's deconstruct. Well, what is it? It's like, it's energy moving through your system. But what the problem with that, it's kind of like a surge of energy that comes from ego taking something personally, and anger is necessarily destructive. However, you know, alchemically, what we can do is we can strip the narrative, you know, so like you can take anger and you can just like remove the conceptual thought, remove all the ego's narratives, which is like, you did this and I did it, you know, this kind of thing, like self kind of important, even if you're right, even if it's true that a person did something, right? Strip all of that and use the energy of anger and apply it towards something constructive. So like, you know, Tom and I had like a situation, right? And where we were in a kind of, I don't want to get into it now, but it's like what we did in that moment is like, instead of perpetuating negativity, right? We were like, let's go do our sadhana, let's do our practice. So like all of that negativity, you know, like we felt all of that, right? And we were like, we made a kind of at the beginning of the practice, we created an intention that like made this situation lead us towards becoming more wise, more skillful. You know, like you take all of that negativity and you use it to really make yourself better so that you can respond better. And then people who are around you who are kind of, you know, not treating you well or misbehaving, you know, you can kind of understand that like we're all deluded, number one, and that's what you kind of see when you sit down to meditate. You realize that we're all nobody's in control, we're all driven by the voices of ego, and for as long as we are in that kind of ego place, we are going to have conflict, because ego is always looking out for number one. Ego is inherently self-obsessed, you know, swings from arrogance to low self-esteem. It's defensive. It's just looking around to blame somebody else, like it doesn't want to take responsibility, you know. So you will always have conflict for as long as you live in the ego. But you know, with meditation, you start to deconstruct that. You see yourself. Then you can understand when somebody's a garbage person and they act poorly. You can understand that like they are confused, you know, and they have a potential to be a Buddha, to be fully enlightened, to be this amazing being, but they're currently confused. So like, you know, and this is why you have to have a wider context, which doesn't come from secular, but it comes from spiritual perspective. And that is that we're all inherently pure. We all are made of the same stuff, but we are kind of covered up with layers of ignorance and confusion. And, you know, part of the Buddhist path, for example, is like to connect with the higher self and to connect with the quality of the higher self, which is like love and compassion that is unconditional. So like think like if you're a mother or a father and your child whom you love, you know, has some issues in their head and they go and kill somebody, right? You know that the child did something wrong, you know that they made a major transgression, and like, but your love for them doesn't change. You feel pain that they did this, right? And you, but you don't, you're, so in the same way, when you tap into your higher self, you're not judging other people from the place of ego, which is all about, well, you did for me, you didn't do this for me, excuse me, you know what. It's like you step outside of that and you're kind of in this universal consciousness, which is divine. And divine consciousness is that of love. You know, when you tap into that, you have no problem loving your enemies. You know, you don't have to agree with them, you don't have to have them in your life. If somebody, it's actually an act of compassion to remove somebody who's constantly harming you, verbally or physically or otherwise, because by doing that you show them that that's not okay. And you know, we think that that having compassion for perpetrators makes us automatically condone their actions. That's actually not true at all. You know, I'll tell you an example just from my personal experience. I'm somebody who's like a very wrathful, intense person. I'm like Serbian all the way. I'm half Croatian. I have two sides to my personality, but I've always been very like kind of intense person. And you know, if I'm angry, like words come out and I'm just really right. And if I, you know, if I came to a place where like somebody can like freak out at me, and like send all these words, and like if I became a person who can like see all of that come at me and not respond with vitriol like I used to, then anybody can, because I'm a very like, I'll get into your face. So it's definitely possible. And when these things happen, so I want to go more into my experience of like, somebody not long ago was like coming at me, right? And was blaming me for things that I'm not really responsible. But because I understand myself, because I've seen myself in meditation, I've seen my mind, and I know how mind works, and I understand a little bit of psychology, I knew that this person was hijacked and that I wasn't talking to the person. I was right now confronted with their anger, which is like the ego, the fear, the everything, it's like fight or flight system activated.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that came from this person's mouth, I didn't take it in as like, I was like, oh, this person is just, nobody's home right now. It's just automatic stuff,
I think maybe.
But I want to just finish this point. However, I felt stress in my body. Like in my mind, I wasn't depressed. I wasn't, it was an intense situation. Like it was like, but I wasn't angry, and I wasn't. However, I did feel stress inside of my body. My body was stressed because the human animal, the imprint, that stuff is still inside, and it takes a really long time to root out. And I think enlightenment is once we have totally kind of disarmed the self-protective mechanism of the ego. That's like that, the instinct for self-preservation. That's like so wired. So there is a way. So this is like the direct impact of meditation, is being able to separate from the stress. Your body will feel it, but your mind is like, there is like separation that happens. You create some space. What were we gonna say?
I think kind of to wrap it up, the benefits of meditation and understanding why anger is not a path to walk is seeing that we're giving our power of our mind to others when we allow ourselves to get angry like that. We don't, you're not in control of your mind when other people can upset you and completely derail your peace of mind. You're having the control and having the choice of how you respond. Anger does not ever work with that, in my experience. So yeah, I think
you don't think clearly when you're angry. This is a psychological fact. When you're angry, you're not in control. Okay, it's like all of your automatic things freaking out. It's your human animal. Somebody is writing, and I want to like point this out. In situations of oppression, it's not possible, with the government killing children, for instance. It's not egotistical to be angry, and you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. Like why we're now talking, we're not even talking about that. Yes, there's horrible stuff happening in the world. There are sociopaths, killing children. All of that is happening. But like we're now just talking about like you in front of another person. If you can't control that, forget about controlling like bigger things. But to also answer this question, it's a little bit, I can zoom out of it for a second. There are awful things happening, and this is where the spiritual view comes in. And certainly, let's look at what makes somebody hurt others. Okay, what makes a government go and like find justification to go and destroy other people's lives, other human beings, children, right? These are voices of ego. So like this is kind of like the same part of you, for example, that says it's okay for me to go and insult or assault somebody who doesn't hold my point of view, or somebody that I perceive is in the wrong. Like that energy, that like kind of justification of like, oh, I will hurt you just because you hurt me. That's the response of a human animal. And like that level of that kind of lack of control, also like greed and kind of self-interest, all of that is human animal, right? So like anytime we allow the human animal inside to take over, we are kind of doing the same thing that oppressors do, that we see out there hurting other people. We're just doing it on a much smaller scale. So like actually it makes us very hypocritical if you think about it. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm like, I totally get it. I have felt outrage. Tom and I are both vegan. We, care about, we're not vegan Nazis, but we care about animals, and imagine that, like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm somebody who like loves animals and I don't want to hurt them, and that's why I refuse, I gave up my attachment, my addiction to meat, because I don't want to contribute in that kind of suffering, right? And then I come to people who eat meat, and then I go like, you are, and then I hate on them, and then I have anger for them. Like, what is that? That's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help them, because if I go to them and I kind of point fingers, and it's like, that's not going to change them, and that's like, so like we have to really think these things through, and it's like, what will help? I mean, it's very difficult to know how we can help current situation with the war. I don't know how I can actually, I don't think that I, or even 10 of us or 100 of us, we can get together and maybe have a peaceful protest or whatever. But ultimately, I don't know how we can stop something that's happening. However, what we can stop is we can stop being angry, antagonistic, shitty people to each other. We can stop hurting each other with words. If you can't help somebody, at least don't harm them. And this is like the meaning of spiritual practice. It's not easy, man. It's like, it's really hard not to go and punch somebody in the face when they're like, do something that really is painful and like, hurting others. Like, you can be angry till the cows come home. But what, at the end of the day, what you've done is you just programmed yourself to respond to a trigger with anger. And the more you do that, you create neural pathways in your brain. Every time you do something, the more you do that, the more you're likely to do it again. And basically, falling into anger is losing control, and not acting with like your full capacity of your mind and your intellect.
I would say, this is not to condone apathy or complacence. An old adage is, if there is something you can do, do it. If there's nothing you can do, let it go. So, meditating and using analysis gives you the opportunity, without anger, to look at a situation and ask yourself, what can I actually do? What will actually change this situation?
And you start with your own life.
Not perpetuate the situation.
You start with your own life. You want peace out there, you can't talk about peace out there until you have rooted greed and ignorance and hatred out of your heart. It's very easy to see somebody out there doing something wrong and to hate them. We often want to, like, when we see somebody doing something wrong, we're like, oh, I was this person. I'd be like, I want to put this person in a chair and pull their fingernails off. Like it's like, but what? That's like psycho, like stuff. I mean, I'm extreme, it's an extreme example, but like, we want people we don't like, we want them to suffer. I know, like, for example, let's look at the political thing real quick. There are people who like are Democrats and people who are Republicans or whatever. And there are people who like love Trump and people who hate Trump. When there was assassination attempt, there were people who were coming out rejoicing. But it's like, think what you're talking about. You can hate Trump. He could be like, you could say he's a narcissistic child, he's whatever, but it's like, he's where he is, and that's the way it is. It's a product of his karma, blah, 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 right? But to wish somebody to be killed and destroyed and harmed doesn't make you any better than somebody else who is kind of doing the same things. Because people who are bombing children of another country are people who think, oh, because I don't like them, that's good enough reason for me to go and bomb them and fucking root them out and the whole lot. I fucking, What's the difference? It's that you're doing the same thing, and you have to analyze this thing with wisdom. Like, it's so easy to follow our automatic feelings. That's what we all do. That's where we are in this shit show. So if you want to change something, you have to wake up. You have to like own your feelings. You have to see them. We have to see how we're all very hypocritical. Every fucking day we're all hypocrites, and I'm not saying that to like guilt us or say we're bad. It's to say that like we're doing something wrong and we can fix it. And we have to wake up and we have to fix ourselves first, and then we can like do little things for others, acts of kindness, and then little by little we can all get there.
And you can think of the analogy, if you're trying to save somebody from drowning, you have to make sure you're not drowning first.
You have to know how to swim.
Right. Like they say in airplanes, put your air mask on first before you apply oxygen to others. That you have to make sure you're capable and fully present in order to help others first. Yeah.
And last thing I'm gonna say, spirituality. If meditation for spirituality, spirituality is not for a Joe Schmo, for just anybody. Most people actually are not interested in transcendence because they're so wrapped up in this life, in appearances, in the material world, material existence. Transcendence means going beyond societal norms. Like it's a very radical thing. You're going beyond human rules and
dogmatic morals.
when you live in society, when you meditate deeply and you start to see just how everything is so off, how our own, even like, for me, I know I try really hard to be a certain kind of person, to be fair, to be, and it's hard to do the right thing. And, we often make mistakes and we often do things out of ignorance. So like, the way society is right now, like the therapists in society, for the most part, are off. People that we think are professionals or have some kind of authority over something are mostly off. We're all off. We're not functioning well. We're all deluded, and it's like, it's very radical for me to say this, but this is what I see as a result of meditating, because I see through all this kind of stuff. We're kind of drowning. And then when you see that, renunciation happens automatically. You're like no longer attached to the values that are being pushed in the society, which is like very materialistic stuff, very superficial stuff, and only then you're really ready to like take your enlightenment seriously, which is, enlightenment is about getting out of this confused state, which is basically status quo of the world. So spirituality is radical, and these ideas, this what we talk about, is kind of out there for a lot of people. And I'm not going to blame anybody for like checking out of it, but you have to know what your point of view is. And anyway, I'm going to stop because I think it's getting heavy. It wasn't supposed to get this heavy, but it is what it is.
All right.
We're going to stop. All right. Thank you, guys. I hope we didn't step on anybody's toes. We all want the same thing. We all want to be happy, and we all want everybody to be happy, to be safe. And, the world is not doing well. So that's why we need to use radical tools to like help ourselves and others. Okay. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the Sunday.
See you guys next week.
See you next week.